Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into the incredible 2,500-year journey of how a localized ancient Indian philosophy transformed into a massively diverse global tradition. And you know what makes this story so mind-blowing? It did the whole thing without relying on military conquest. Instead, it spread like wildfire through trade, cultural exchange, and deep philosophical resonance. It's literally like watching a single seed grow into this massive, interconnected forest.
We came across a thought from our source material that really hits the nail on the head. As I am from Land of Diversity, India, I have inherent curiosity about all religions. I have met Buddhist people from many countries. I have visited many Buddhist temples in Southeast Asia. That inherent curiosity is exactly the vibe we're bringing today. Tracing the physical and spiritual journey of these teachings across the globe, we get to see firsthand how crossing borders and encountering immense human diversity fundamentally shaped world history. Just a quick heads up before we really get going, this explainer is strictly for informative purposes. We're taking an objective look at historical texts, timelines, and cultural shifts just to understand how this massive movement of ideas actually went down. All right, so here's our roadmap for today. We've got 1. Origins of the Awakened One. 2. Ashoka's peaceful global catalyst. 3. The three major traditions. 4. A country-by-country journey. And 5. Core roots of Buddhist thought. Let's get right to it.
Section 1. Origins of the Awakened One, starting in 5th century BCE, India. So, our journey kicks off in ancient India. This is where Siddhartha Gautama, who of course became known as the Buddha or the Enlightened One, attained enlightenment at Bodh Gaya. And right there, a highly localized movement was born.
What's truly fascinating here is the sheer sweeping scale of Buddhism's expansion over more than 2 millennia. It kicks off in the 5th century BCE with the Buddha teaching just in northern India. But as we move forward in time, it doesn't just flare up and fade away. Emperor Ashoka starts spreading it in the 3rd century BCE, and then it systematically reaches Sri Lanka, China, and Japan between the 1st and 7th centuries CE. By the 7th to 9th centuries, it's climbing up into Tibet and the Himalayas, finally reaching a true global scale in the modern era. This wasn't some overnight explosion, you know. It was this steady, deliberate march of ideas across hundreds of generations.
Moving right along is Section 2, Ashoka's peaceful global catalyst, or the wind that spread the seed. We really have to talk about the single greatest catalyst for Buddhism's international spread, Emperor Ashoka of the Maurya Empire.
If you look at world history, empire expansion usually means one thing, right? Violence. But following the incredibly bloody Kalinga War, Emperor Ashoka had this dramatic change of heart. He embraced Buddhism and completely shifted away from military conquest. He actually transformed his empire's entire focus into a moral and humanitarian movement. It's a stark contrast to how most empires operated, and it fundamentally changed the entire trajectory of the religion.
So how exactly did he spread these ideas peacefully? Well, Ashoka essentially used the massive wealth and reach of the Maurya Empire to build infrastructure. We're talking thousands of stupas and monasteries. He sponsored the Third Buddhist Council to preserve the teachings. But maybe most importantly, he sent missionaries way out across Asia, actively promoting ahimsa, or nonviolence, and ethical compassion. He effectively took an Indian philosophy and turned it into a pan-Asian tradition.
Which brings us to Section 3, the three major traditions, or the branches of the tree. As Buddhism traveled into different regions through trade routes and royal patronage, local cultures didn't just passively absorb it, they adopted it, which led to the three major forms of Buddhism we see practiced today. When these teachings encountered new local philosophies, some really profound adaptations took place. Take Mahāyāna, for example, known as the Great Vehicle. It emerged with this deep emphasis on universal compassion and the ideal of the bodhisattva. Now, a bodhisattva is a being who actually delays their own ultimate liberation just to help others achieve it. This tradition grew incredibly rich philosophically, encompassing diverse schools, and eventually became the absolute dominant form in East Asia.
Let's compare the landscape of these traditions. First up, we have Theravāda, which means teaching of the elders. This is the oldest surviving tradition, relying heavily on the early Pali Canon with a huge focus on individual enlightenment. You'll find this primarily in places like Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Myanmar. Next is Mahāyāna, the great vehicle we just mentioned, which focuses on compassion and the bodhisattva ideal, taking root mostly in China, Japan, Korea, and Vietnam. Finally, there's Vajrayāna, or the diamond vehicle. This form leans into tantric practices, intense rituals, and strong guru-disciple relationships, and it really found its home in Tibet, Bhutan, and Mongolia.
All right, time for Section 4,
A country-by-country journey, mapping the forest. If Buddhism spread this far, how exactly did it manage to adapt and fit into all these entirely new worlds?
Let's trace one incredibly fascinating route step by step. Around the 1st century CE, merchants and monks basically carried these teachings along the massive trade networks of the Silk Road straight into China. From there, the philosophy flowed right into Korea by the 4th century, and then, eventually, it passed from Korea into Japan by the 6th century. It wasn't magic, you know. It was the physical, literal movement of people, commerce, and translated texts acting as a bridge between totally different civilizations.
Comparing these different regions really highlights the amazing adaptability of these teachings. When Buddhism arrived in East Asia, it bumped into deeply entrenched systems like Confucianism and Taoism. But instead of clashing, it integrated. It deeply influenced aesthetics, tea ceremonies, and even martial arts. Meanwhile, over in the Himalayan region, that same Indian philosophy combined with local esoteric and tantric traditions to form a completely unique identity, becoming deeply, deeply intertwined with local governance.
When you look at the staggering geographical reach and the immense time frame, the diversity is just wild. Sri Lanka, for instance, saw Buddhism arrive way back in the 3rd century BCE, and they've been preserving the Theravāda tradition ever since. But then look at China in the 1st century CE, Japan in the 6th century, and Tibet adopting its Vajrayāna form in the 7th century CE. Even Thailand, where the main form today is Theravāda, saw its major arrival much later, between the 11th and 13th centuries. The timeline really is as expansive as the geography itself.
But again, none of this happens by magic. There is a profoundly human element to this whole story. We talk a lot about trade routes and empires, but this all relied on specific, super dedicated individuals. People like Mahinda in Sri Lanka, or scholars like Kumarajiva and Xuanzang, who painstakingly translated complex Indian scriptures into Chinese, or Songtsen Gampo and Padmasambhava in Tibet. These were the actual people who physically carried, debated, and translated these intensely complex philosophies across freezing mountain passes and scorching deserts. And honestly, they did the whole shebang without modern hiking gear or GPS. Finally, we arrive at Section 5, Core Roots of Buddhist Thought, the Shared Foundation. After looking at all this immense cultural divergence, how does this possibly build back to a single, unifying foundation? The ultimate takeaway here is that beneath the surface, the roots are absolutely identical. Whether you're observing a strict Zen tea ceremony in Japan, participating in a Vipassana meditation in Myanmar, or witnessing a vibrant Vajrayāna ritual in Bhutan, all of these major traditions share the exact same underlying teachings. We're talking about the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, karma, a profound dedication to compassion, and the ultimate pursuit of liberation from suffering. The branches might look totally different, but they absolutely all drink from the exact same soil. So, I want to leave you with this final thought to reflect on. How does a core philosophy completely transform to adopt the unique cultures of the world while remaining perfectly intact at its roots? It really is a testament to the incredible flexibility and profound depth of the ideas born in northern India over 2.5 millennia ago. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer today as we explored this remarkable legacy of peaceful cultural exchange. Keep asking questions and keep exploring.